Tracy was my first hero. She took me upstairs to her bedroom and showed me her incredible record collection, stacks and stacks of 7 inches and LPs with names I'd never heard before. Names like The Misfits and Bad Brains and Minor Threat and Dead Kennedys and The Germs and Flipper and Circle Jerks and Discharge and Crass and Conflict, Black Flag, White Flag, Void, Faith, The Dicks, The Dickies, The Minutemen, The Adolescents, The Ramones, The Big Boys, GBH, DRI, SOA, DOA, MDC, MIA, CIA, Crucifix, Crucifux, X, X-Ray Specs, Wire, Sex Pistols, The Buzzcocks, Rights of the Accused, The Necros, Fang, Government Issue, The Descendants. I sat down and I played every last one. This was the first day of the rest of my life. That night I went to my first concert. Though it wasn't in an arena, it was a dingy little hole in the wall directly across the street from Wrigley Field called the Cubby Bear. There you go. And it wasn't any band I'd ever heard of. It was a local Chicago punk rock band by the name of Naked Ray Gun. And with the 1, 2, 3, 4, the band kicked in, and the most ferocious noise. Bodies were flying everywhere, spit and sweat and leather and volume and broken glass and piss and fucking puke. I was in heaven. And it was our secret. The next day, I took the L to Wax Trax Records. I bought a Killing Joke t-shirt and the soundtrack to the decline of Western civilization. I was converted. I was no longer one of you. I was one of us. But more than the noise and the rebellion and the danger, it was the blissful removal of these bands from any source of conventional, popular corporate structure and the underground network that supported the music's independence that was totally inspiring to me. At 13 years old, I realized I could start my own band, I could write my own song, I could record my own record, I could start my own label, I could release my own record, I could book my own shows, I could write and publish my own fanzine, I could silkscreen my own t-shirts. I could do this all by myself. There was no right or wrong because it was all mine. Upon returning to Washington, D.C., I dove headfirst into the local hardcore punk rock scene. Little did I know that one of the country's most prolific and influential music scenes was right there in my own backyard, Washington, D.C. Minor Threat, Bad Brains, Scream, these bands were now my Beatles and my Stones, my Zeppelin, my Dylan. And these were the fucking Reagan years. So protest music was on fire. My first punk rock show back at home was actually the Rock Against Reagan concert, July 4th, 1983. With the stage built at the base of the Lincoln Memorial Steps on Independence Day, it was a recipe for disaster. 700,000 barefoot, sunburned rednecks from Maryland and Virginia in Lynyrd Skynyrd and Judas Priest t-shirts, stonewashed jeans and bandanas, converging on the nation's capital to watch fireworks, coolers full of beer and Southern comfort, only to find Texas's own dirty, rotten imbeciles singing their song, I Don't Need Society. Your number's up. You have to go. The system says I told you so. Stocked in a train like a truckload of cattle, sent off to slaughter in a useless battle. Thousands of us sent off to die, never really knowing why. Fuck the system, they can't have me. I don't need society. I don't need society. It was a fucking riot waiting to happen. I actually bought that record that day from the lead singer out of the back of his van. It was a 33-song 7-inch. Stuffed in a homemade sleeve. It is still, to this day, one of my most prized possessions. When the sun had gone down and the legendary Dead Kennedys finally came on stage, lead singer Jello Biafra pointed and screamed at the Washington Monument, calling it the great Klansman in the sky with its two blinking red eyes. Well, that was it. The powder keg finally blew. Helicopters buzzed overhead, shining spotlights into the crowd as policemen on horses beat their way through the punks with their billy clubs. It was right out of Apocalypse Now. This was my Woodstock. This was my Altamont. This was rock and roll. No matter what t-shirt you had or what fucking haircut you had, this was fucking real. I burned inside. I was possessed and empowered and inspired and enraged and so in love with life and so in love with music that it had the power to incite a fucking riot or an emotion or to start a revolution or just to save a young boy's life. So I joined a band. I dropped out of high school. I hit the fucking road. I starved. My hands bled. If I slept on floors, I slept on stages, I slept on the fucking floors, under the fucking stages. And I loved every minute of it because I was free. And I wanted to incite a riot or an emotion or a revolution or to save someone's life by inspiring them to pick up an instrument, just as I did as a kid. I wanted to be someone's Edgar Winter. I wanted to be someone's Naked Raygun. I wanted to be someone's Bad Brains or Beatles because that was the reward. That was the intention. We played that type of music, so everyone left us alone. There was no career opportunity. There was no Hall of Fame. There were no trophies. There were no A&R guys buying fucking Benihana dinners. Our reward was knowing that we had done all of this on our own and it was real. But inevitably, it wasn't long before I found myself stranded in Hollywood without a cent to my name and no way home, crashed out in a Laurel Canyon bungalow with a bunch of female mud wrestlers. Don't ask. That's a whole other fucking keynote address right there. And that's when I heard the 5 words that changed my life forever. Have you heard of Nirvana? So, Nirvana were one of us. Raised on Creedence and Flipper and Beatles and Black Flag, they seemed to share the same ideals, the same intentions. But they had something more. They had songs. They had Kurt. And what they didn't have was a drummer. So without hesitation, I packed all of my drums into one big U-Haul cardboard box, grabbed my old Army duffel bag, and I flew up to Seattle. We practiced in a barn every day. It was all that we had. There was no sun. There was no moon. There was just the barn. And those songs. Kurt had, without a doubt, found his voice. Every practice would begin with an improvisational free-form jam, which kind of served as an exercise in dynamic and musical collaboration, communication. We were speaking to each other without words. Verbal communication was never really Nirvana's forte. So we spoke to each other with our instruments. And the combination of our 3 voices resulted in a sound that eventually caught the ear of a major label record company. Or 10 major label record companies. Suddenly, we were thrown into a bidding war of A&R guys with fancy shoes from Fred Siegel and radio promo dudes with little one-hitters in their glove compartments and closets full of complimentary box sets and fucking Benihana every fucking night. At one meeting, after playing a demo of our song In Bloom for Donnie Einer, yay, Donnie Einer. In his high-rise office in New York City, Donnie turned to Kurt and asked, "So, what do you guys want?" Kurt slouched over in his chair, looked up to Donnie sitting behind his massive oak desk, and said, "We want to be the biggest band in the world." I laughed. I thought he was fucking kidding. He wasn't. Now you have to remember where music was at the time. Here are the Billboard year-end top 10 songs of 1990. Number 10, John Bon Jovi, Blaze of Glory. Number 9, Billy Idol, Cradle of Love. Number 8, En Vogue, with Hold On. Number 7, Phil Collins, Another Day in Paradise. Number 6, Mariah Carey, Vision of Love. Number 5, Madonna with Vogue. Number 4, Bill Bev DeVoe with Poison. Number 3, Sinead O'Connor with Nothing Compares to You. Number 2, Roxette with It Must Have Been Love. And the number 1 song of 1990, Wilson fucking Phillips with Hold On. How Kurt could even think we'd make a ripple in this ridiculous mainstream world of polished pop music was beyond me. It was beyond everyone. It made absolutely no sense. It was simply unimaginable. It was the type of hopeless, shallow aspiration that we had been conditioned to reject, ultimately relieving us of any intention other than just to be ourselves. I mean, the very definition of the word nirvana in the dictionary is a place or state characterized by freedom from or oblivion to pain, worry, and the external world. We'd always been left to our own devices as musicians, day after day in our bedrooms as children, day after day in that old barn. We did everything ourselves. What did we need with that world? A few more guys with A&R guys with fancy shoes, a few more box sets, a few more dinners at fucking Benihana. And we signed a deal. Following in the footsteps of our great heroes, Sonic Youth, we signed to the David Geffen Company, threw everything in the back of our old Chevy van, and headed down to Sound City. 16 days, 13 songs. We were used to recording 16 songs in one day. This was the big time. All of those cold, rainy days spent in that barn, chopping away at those songs, speaking to each other without words, finding our voice. It was all for this. When we pulled into the parking lot of Sound City, I quickly realized that this was not the big, fancy, major label Hollywood recording studio I had imagined. Not at all. It was a shithole. It was a run-down, burned-out, dumpy old joint in a warehouse complex deep in the sunburned San Fernando Valley, miles away from any fucking Fred Segal or Benihana. It was perfect. Famous for such legendary albums like Neil Young's After the Gold Rush, Fleetwood Mac, Tom Petty's Damn the Torpedoes, Cheap Trick's Heaven Tonight, Rick Springfield's Working Class Dog. It was hallowed ground. But it looked like no one had cleaned up the place since fucking Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were runners there.